Revenge of the Sith can be split into 50 distinct scenes, and today we're ranking them from the least to most high ground. Okay, not quite, but we are ranking them from worst to best, using factors like how good this scene is on its own versus how important it is for the rest of the movie. At 50 is end credits. So it turns out we do have to include the different credit scenes on here, and I'm putting end credits in last due to the simplicity of it and the absence of the General Grievous theme. 49 is opening logos. So these are only slightly better than the end credits because we get that iconic 20th Century Fox opening music. At 48 is Revenge of the Sith. Now this is where things are starting to really pick up speed, because we have just gone from words on the screen referencing the people that worked on the movie to words on the screen that reference the actual movie itself. And at 47 is the heroes regroup. For our first real scene of the movie, I have this in last because this honestly feels like one of the only lulls in the pacing for this movie. Keep in mind that Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars movie, so I don't really have too many problems with it, but this part almost feels worse than the rest of the movie, since the regrouping of the main heroes happens right after Order 66 and way before Anakin versus Obi-Wan on Mustafar, actually starting one of the slower sections of the movie. And for some reason, Obi-Wan and Yoda are acting way too casual in this scene, considering everyone they know and love has the potential of dying or already being dead. Next up at 46 is Jedi War Council. There's nothing particularly wrong with this scene, or really moments, as it's so short you can hardly consider it a true scene. However, as this literally is just the Jedi talking about the situation with the Outer Rim sieges, and then Mace Windu revealing his suspicions of Chancellor Palpatine, there's not really too much going on here. At 45 is Padmé's Departure. This is another very brief and somewhat forgettable scene that is only above our last two picks, due to the emotional tension of seeing Padmé leave Coruscant for the last time, knowing she is going to meet with her husband, who may no longer be that who she knew for her whole life. At 44 is Bad Dreams.
Jedi don't have nightmares.
As Anakin would say,
"This is where the fun begins."
And this is a good scene that shows the main catalyst of the plot with the dreams of Padmé's death and pregnancy, and then also we get a nice quiet moment between Anakin and his wife. However, this scene is placed lower on the list because of how simple it is and the slightly cringy moment of romance between the two.
You're so beautiful.
Then again, I suppose this is nothing compared to the non-stop, never-ending nonsense between the two lovers in the last movie. At 43 is Secret Delivery. Here we get to see the introduction of Polis Massa and the arrival of Palpatine on Coruscant with this sacred barbecue platter thing. I'm not sure what he used that for, but I believe this cold rain ain't making the brisket taste too good. Okay, I was writing the script at 1 AM and then fell asleep, but that's such an unhinged joke that I think we should just leave that in the video, you know? At 42, on the Jedi Council. Not only is this scene extremely memeable, I especially like this version where they swapped Mace Windu and Anakin with AI by Axvior here on Anakin's reassignment to the Council, and this sets the next section of the movie in motion, that being the Outer Rim sieges led by Obi-Wan and Yoda on Utapau and Kashyyyk, so therefore there's some pretty important stuff going on here. At 41, Mace learns the truth. While I like the respect Mace shows Anakin here, it kind of feels like a release of tension between the two, but on the other hand, the acting here is a bit rough from both actors, and it's weird how Mace hears this crippling news and then just immediately leaves without meditating or anything. At 40 is Not the Chosen One. I think this is one of the better dialogue-heavy scenes from the beginning of the movie, because we get to hear each of the Jedi talk about their take on the Chosen One prophecy, and also some foreshadowing about Anakin's betrayal here as well.
He will not let me down. He never has.
At 39 is Seeds of Distrust. This is where Padmé shares her suspicions of the Chancellor to Anakin, and I far prefer the dramatic scenes between these two in this movie over the light romantic scenes from episode 2, but also this scene further confuses and conflicts Anakin's understanding of Palpatine and everything happening to him, which progresses the tragedy element of the film. At 38 is A New Hope. While this is a borderline perfect ending to the movie, it is also just that, an ending, and doesn't hit as hard as many of the other scenes from the movie, but seeing Darth Vader, Palpatine, and Tarkin looking over the Death Star, seeing Leia taken to Alderaan, and Luke taken to Tatooine, all ties together this movie and sets up the next part of the story in the original trilogy as well. While I would have liked to have seen the moment of Yoda landing on Dagobah, since there was honestly more focus on him in the prequels, in this movie in particular, I also understand that it probably works better without this scene. Next up at 37 is Grievous on Utapau. I like this scene a lot because not only does it add a brief element of excitement to an otherwise slow part of the plot, but also this showcases the awesomeness of General Grievous, the planet Utapau, and John Williams absolutely cooked way more here than he needed to. Also, I like the ominous feeling this scene has, like this is the beginning of the end of the Clone Wars. 36. The Chancellor's Request. Giving Anakin and Palpatine more scenes together in this movie was a great call for his turn to work, and the acting from Ian McDiarmid really makes these work despite how slow they might have felt otherwise. 35. The Future of the Twins. It was good to hear Yoda actually explain why the twins are being separated, and then tying up the plot device of Force Ghosts was very interesting. Also, Padmé's funeral is a beautifully tragic little moment with some incredibly mellow art direction. At 34 is Rise Lord Vader. This scene I'm split on, kind of like Anakin here, because on one hand, Palpatine's distorted voice sounds epic and the weight and creepiness here is overpowering, but at the same time, I don't like how Anakin goes from being on the edge of sanity to accepting his assignment to massacre the Jedi Temple so quickly without considering the degree of pain this will cause everything he knows. At 33 is Arrival on Utapau. Again, I think Utapau is a really cool planet, so seeing it up close with the negotiator himself is wonderful, as is the look at the species of this planet with the Powans and Utai. At 32 is Kashyyyk. While I wish these Clone Wars battle scenes were longer to show the true scale of the war, this is a reminder to the people that say General Grievous serves no purpose, and Obi-Wan leaving Coruscant serves no purpose is undeniably wrong, as both of these elements of the film flesh out the massive scale of the Clone Wars, which is an essential part of the story. But obviously Kashyyyk is a goated planet, and seeing an army of Wookiees led by Yoda fighting the droid army was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. At 31 is Happy Reunions. Don't get me wrong, Anakin and Padmé's reunion is very sweet and all here, but I mainly put this scene higher because of the banter between Obi-Wan and Anakin when they are getting off the Jedi shuttle bus, because it feels like dialogue straight out of the Clone Wars. 30. Wait for Me. As brief of a scene as this is, I like the tension between Anakin and Padmé here, and how this scene refocuses Anakin's intent on Padmé, but my favorite thing here is when Anakin steps into the darkness and he says,
I will not betray the Republic.
As we now see how his thirst for power has completely corrupted his mind to the point that he is saying irrational things to his very wife. At 29 is Secret Assignment. This scene shows that Obi-Wan actually cares about Anakin more than the rest of the Jedi, and makes their conflict later even more devastating. Also, the way this conversation flows feels very realistic, how I would expect Obi-Wan to try and reason with Anakin while also protecting him, while Anakin retaliates in frustration but does his best to listen to Obi-Wan here at the same time. 28. The Terrible Truth. Obi-Wan's realization of his best friend being a mass murderer of Jedi is a big moment that, hot take, actually was well acted, but perhaps my nostalgia has blinded my view on these matters. At 27, Council with Yoda. Honestly, this is my pick for the most underrated scene of the movie, as we get to the only personal moments between Anakin and Yoda, or Anakin and any Jedi that isn't Obi-Wan for that matter. Also, even though Yoda's advice is very extreme for sure, it is very spiritually wise nonetheless. Not saying I completely agree with it, as in the New Testament of the Bible, Jesus talks about grieving as a good, essential thing. I'm a Christian, by the way, in case you don't know. So personally, I think it's necessary to actually process your emotions, than to ball it all up and drown in sorrow. At 26, Obi-Wan confronts Padmé. The music here is absolutely tragic from John Williams. Obi-Wan's declaration that Anakin is the father is crushing, and the moment of Anakin crying on Mustafar, feeling the weight of guilt and regret tearing his soul in two, are all some of the most poignant moments of Revenge of the Sith. But moving into the upper half of the list, we have 25, Yoda vs Sidious. This has never been my favorite lightsaber duel, but there's no doubt that the intensive fight between Yoda and Darth Sidious in the midst of the Senate chamber is very epic. And seeing the power struggle between Yoda and Palpatine with Force lightning is something more incredible than we've ever seen before or since with the Force. At 24, a hero lost. This is a brief moment, but I find it very powerful, as one of the central aspects of Anakin's character here is that he's not just doing these terrible things completely in control, he's actually terribly confused, conflicted, and everything feels wrong. I think this is something that we have all, including myself, experienced at some point in our lives, which tends to make this scene hit different in the movie. At 23, the Emperor arrives. The part here where Palpatine approaches Anakin and we hear like church bells in the background with an ominous score gives me chills every time. And also the brutal nature of Anakin's wounds intensify this final stretch of the movie. At 22 is Obi-Wan vs Grievous. While our second out of 5 duels isn't a very good duel itself, the scene as a whole is quite well done, with a great build-up, and then the awesome terror-inducing moment of Grievous pulling out 4 lightsabers and wielding them like a buzzsaw, plus the way the clones enter the battle and Obi-Wan begins his chase after Grievous make this a very fun scene all in all. At 21, Yoda visits the Emperor. I honestly prefer the dialogue and tension between these two important figureheads of their respective factions over the non-stop action duel that follows this, especially the satisfaction of the Emperor finally being victorious over the Jedi, and then even better, Yoda sending him flying back into his chair. At 20 is Utapau Chase. And just like with the Yoda Vs Sidious scene, I prefer to the Utapau duel here the corresponding scene that goes with it. The hand-to-hand combat section has some very memorable parts, like when Obi-Wan tries to kick Grievous and then yells out in pain. At 19 is Confronting Grievous, our first scene on our list of the opening sequence of this movie, and one thing I noticed on my last viewing of Revenge of the Sith is just how incredible the Battle of Coruscant opening is. I think this is the worst segment of this sequence, with Grievous meeting Anakin and having his Magna Guards fight them off, but that stuff is still pretty great, and the tension and adventure is still quite high at this moment. Also, the crash landing of the invisible hand ends this opening in a very satisfying way. At 18 is Mace vs Sidious. This is the turning point in the movie, at least literally, where the confrontation between the Jedi and the Dark Lord of the Sith finally occurs. While the beginning is rushed and the scene was shot in a way that makes it very unconvincing that Ian McDiarmid is actually doing much of anything, but the lightning part and getting to see Mace fuel off of the dark side to win are very great aspects here. 17. Tragedy of Darth Plagueis. Apparently Ian McDiarmid was sick during this scene with laryngitis, which gave a unique quality to his voice, and actually this is one of the most intriguing, well-written scenes of the movie that masterfully sets up the trap for Anakin in front of our very eyes and looks at Palpatine's backstory in a clever way as well. 16. March on the Jedi Temple. This is a defining and epic moment of Order 66, where the Sith finally have their revenge. 15. General Grievous. Here we are introduced to one of the coolest villains in Star Wars, and Anakin and Obi-Wan continue their adventure to rescue the Chancellor with great banter between the two Jedi. At 14, Sidious revealed. If the Darth Plagueis scene was the hook, then this is the retrieval of the fish from the water. Okay, that has to be single-handedly the worst analogy anyone's ever made. Don't worry, I'll get better at it, trust me, but the acting here, I'm working on it, trust me. But the acting here and slow build-up of Palpatine's seduction of Anakin is done wonderfully. Personally, I think that Anakin should have been asking him about how to save Padme and considering listening to him rather than going straight to reporting them to the Jedi, because that would have made his turn later more convincing than this ultra loyal to the Jedi guy. At 13 is the birth of the Empire. This is a huge moment of importance that was built up across the entire prequel trilogy, and then Vader's slaughter of the Separatist Council on Mustafar was the Vader hallway scene before the Vader hallway scene really existed. He has the same mannerisms, cadence, and everything. At 12 is Brothers Farewell. Seeing this moment between Anakin and Obi-Wan for the last time as friends is really touching when you know what's coming, and also we get to see how desperately Anakin just wanted other people's approval of him. At 11, rescuing the Chancellor. This is my second favorite duel of the movie, and the beginning of Anakin's turn through the killing of Darth Tyrannus is great. 10, battle over Coruscant. This was everything the Battle of Endor from Return of the Jedi could have been. The battle was full of interesting moments like the buzz droids and Anakin and Obi-Wan avoiding the missiles, and also the backdrop looks like a beautiful painting with an endless sea of ships. At 9 is Darth Vader Awakens. This is the culmination of Darth Vader's tragedy, where the one power he sacrificed everything for to save Padmé's life has been taken away from him through her death. At 8 is Time to Leave. Even though this is part of Order 66, we are technically counting it as its own scene, and I love Bail Organa's interaction here, plus the killing of the younglings is obviously a very dark moment that shows the true dark depths that Darth Vader is capable of. At 7 is Birth and Rebirth. The parallel here of Vader's transformation being completed as his true love is dying and his two children, who are his last hope, are born is pretty incredible, and this was a great choice in editing for the feeling of the end of the movie. At 6 is Anakin's final decision. Even though not a single word is spoken by Anakin here, seeing him process the weight of this decision is extremely emotional and eerie, especially when paired with John Williams' Padmé's Ruminations, one of his most otherworldly pieces. Real quick, here's the Christian advice of this video. If you want to get back to the main video, then you can skip to this time right here. Now, today I actually want to talk about waking up early. Now, this isn't an explicit rule in the Bible that you have to wake up early as a Christian, but one thing that is true is that the Bible does talk about this many different times, such as Mark 1:35, where Jesus wakes up early to pray in solitude to his Father in heaven. And really, I think this is a good example of a way that we can sort of take why perhaps waking up early is a good thing, not only for productivity, but also when you do this, you get to be truly alone and intimate with God first thing in the morning. So the very first thing you're doing is praying to God, sharing a specific period of time with your Father through prayer or reading the Bible. And it's just a very good way to live, a very healthy way to live. Like I mentioned as well, productivity will be even higher here. You see it across, celebrities and anyone like that. A lot of people that wake up early tends to have a good mindset with success and those sorts of things in life. But of course, take the Christian element as more valuable than that of the productivity that I mentioned. And yeah, getting back to the video, remember we have a new spring merch drop with some really cool things. I'm going to try and buy a few of those products to actually show y'all what it looks like on me, because obviously I'm a prime test subject, right? But yeah, back to the video. At 5 is Order 66. This is a big one, seeing the Jedi Order wiped out, the incredibly heartbreaking music, And even though this isn't the focus of this scene, getting to see this scene take place across multiple new planets with many different Jedi that showcases these characters a little bit, and some of the Clone Wars as well, are all good reasons to love this scene as well. At 4, You're Breaking My Heart. I think the combination of drama, acting, music, and dialogue comes together here to make some of the lines I quote the most in movie history. I like it about as much as the duel itself, and it is some of the juiciest drama of the series. At 3 is Narrow Escapes. This refers to the second half of the Anakin vs Obi-Wan duel, where the platform breaks off around them, they fight on the fallen arm of the facility, and then the duel ends with a more personal section between the two fighting on the droid and platform hovering over the lava. At 2 is Immolation. This is a shocking climactic moment where Anakin's pride gets the best of him and he is horribly maimed and burned as Obi-Wan looks on helplessly, exclaiming that he was like a brother to him, and Hayden Christensen lets out a snarl of pure hatred all before the scene closes out. However, the best scene of all Star Wars is number 1, Battle of Heroes, which is Anakin versus Obi-Wan. This brings their relationship from friends into pure enemies complete. The background is very elaborate as well. The music is 10 out of 10, the choreography is 10 out of 10, and many great moments happen like Anakin choking Obi-Wan to near death, the Obi-Wan spin, the fight on the pipes, and the grapple with the eruption of lava in the background. And if you enjoyed this video, then you might also like this one I did about a year ago where I ranked every deleted scene from the prequel trilogy. But yeah. See ya.